Welcome to episode number 12 of the Kevin Rooke Show. Today I had a chance to speak with Chris Tramount. He's the CEO of Scarce City. Scarce City is a Bitcoin marketplace for buying and selling physical and digital art and collectibles. It leverages the Lightning Network, and we talked a lot about how Scarce City uses Lightning specifically, the differences culturally and from a technical perspective of how Scarce City works versus something like OpenSea or other platforms for selling NFTs and on other different blockchains. And we talked a bunch about memes and Rare Pepes and Counterparty and how the digital collectible space has evolved on Bitcoin versus on Ethereum or other chains. It was a really interesting conversation. Definitely give this one a thorough listen. And throughout the episode, as you have questions, send them over the Lightning Network. Open up a Lightning podcasting app, open up Fountain, send me a message. If you want to support the show, you can send some sats. Can't wait to read them all, and I will be answering any of your questions at the end of the show in the Lightning round. Chris, thanks for joining me today. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Kevin, doing great, man. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Let's dive into what you're building at Scarce City. I think this is a really cool project. I think there's a lot of people that still don't understand it, or some people who haven't even heard of it. So why don't you start off by telling people about, first, what Scarce City is, and second, why you built it and what kind of problem you want to solve.
Sure, yeah. So Scarce City is a marketplace for Bitcoin goods and collectibles. Everything we do is based on Bitcoin. It's not only the goods that we sell having a Bitcoin theme, but we only transact in Bitcoin. And we use Bitcoin technology to enable a lot of our sales. So, for example, we use the Lightning Network to collateralize auction bids. The way we came up with the idea is, look, I got into Bitcoin 2017-ish, around 2018, 19. The creative space in crypto as a whole I was really drawn to. And I noticed a lot of my favorite Bitcoin artists, they were creating physical works and having a hard time selling them. Some of them did really well, but they had really large audiences. And at the same time, you started to see the marketplaces for the NFTs pop up. And a lot of these Bitcoin artists, they felt forced to go to the Ethereum marketplaces, which, that's totally like their thing. And I respect any artist who's making money and able to support themselves by to make more art, but it just didn't feel authentic. So I started thinking about what we could do for Bitcoin. And, I was fortunate to find a technical partner who could help me do the real magic behind the keyboard. And we were also very fortunate to find our way into the Bitcoin artist community. A large part of that was Chief Monkey. He was kind of our chief evangelist and introduced us to a lot of the Bitcoin artists and gave us some of our best ideas, including using Lightning for auction collateral. And from there, once we did our first auction in December of 2 years ago, so 2020, we've just kind of been off to the races, doing more auctions, supporting more Bitcoin art. We've got into the digital asset space that's on Bitcoin, originally with like the OG Rare Pepe counterparty tokens, but more recently with some of the newer tokens that are also minted on counterparty, and also dabbling with some of the other Bitcoin native protocols for the digital assets. So I think that's us in a nutshell, where we're coming from and where we are right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. And can you walk me through how someone uses Scarce City today? Like the different mechanisms you have for auctions and for selling goods, whether they're physical or digital, how that works on a granular level?
Yeah, so we have two different types of sales we do. One is it's kind of our bread and butter, the auctions. We also do fixed price sales. So the fixed price sales, they work, kind of as you would expect. Basically, you see something for sale for a listed price, of course, in Bitcoin, and you pay that Bitcoin and you get the item. If it's a physical good, you input your shipping address. If it's a digital good, you input your digital address. For the auctions, the way it works is you input how much you want to bid in sats, and all we need from you is an email address and a bidder name. And from there, you're directed to pay an invoice over Bitcoin main chain or Lightning that represents a small percentage of your actual bid. Usually it's about 1% of your actual bid. And it's that collateral that keeps you accountable for paying your bid should you win the auction. And then once the auction's over, the item is fully paid for, everybody gets their collateral back. Now, of course, the exception is if the high bidder doesn't pay their high bid, they lose their collateral, and the second place bidder has their chance to pay their bid.
Interesting. When did you decide to add Lightning in? What was the reasoning behind that, I guess?
Yeah, so it actually goes back to when we were really just fiddling around with, what we could do on Bitcoin. And we started with, this is when COVID first broke out, and we started with face masks because everybody needed a face mask. This was so early in COVID. It was before like Bitcoin was anti-face masks. And we did something kind of just as an experiment. We generated Bitcoin addresses for each face mask, or actually the customer generated an address, and the public address would actually be physically printed on the face mask, and the customer would hold a private key. So you could technically prove the authenticity of your face mask, and in that same respect, verify the supply of the face masks. And from that, going into it, actually, we weren't sure if we were going to support Lightning. Lightning, I had never used it up until that point. Of course, I was familiar with it. I had, heard a bunch of people talk about them on podcasts and seen it all over Twitter. But I hadn't had a real reason to use it. So going into that sale, we're like, do we support Lightning? It's a little bit more work. We kind of just want to get something out here. We decided to go ahead and support Lightning because it was right around the time of the halving, and fees spiked up. And we're like, oh gosh, it's actually getting expensive to transact on chain. We got to do something on Lightning. And we were really surprised to see that about a third, and we only sold about like 20 of these things, not even, but a third, so 5 to 10 of the transactions were over Lightning. And that was surprising. And that was kind of the impetus for us to dig into how Lightning works. And I got set up on my first Lightning wallet. And really, it was that first Lightning transaction. You just, experiencing Bitcoin settle immediately and so cheaply, especially when you're used to a high fee environment. It was just a magical experience. And immediately, for me, I was like, okay, this is definitely the future of transacting on Bitcoin and maybe beyond that. So we started really digging in then and educating ourselves into the capabilities of Lightning. And we realized it could be used for much more than just standard payments. And that kind of got the wheels going. We started educating our community, and they started generating ideas of how we could use it.
And so today, is Lightning the only way you can put up collateral for a piece, or
you can put up collateral on chain, of course. Now these days, with fees being so low, putting up collateral on chain it's not that big of a deal, but it's not quite the same magical experience of just seeing your payment instantly settle. But we support everything.
Have you noticed any trends of? You said initially there were about a third of people initially buying things over Lightning. Have you noticed trends of how dominant Lightning is compared to on-chain volume over time?
It's a good question. We've adjusted our features over time, so it's not really a fair A/B comparison. For example, you can make a one-time deposit to participate in multiple of our auctions. And that's something that a lot of our users opt for just because it's easier. But as far as one-off bid deposits, I would guess it's about 50-50 between on-chain and Lightning, probably more Lightning, actually. The general trend is it's just become much easier to onboard onto Lightning. The percentage of successful transactions has gone up a whole lot. the amount people are transacting over Lightning has gone up a whole lot. Like when we first started, I feel like no one was transacting any more than like 250,000 sats, and that number has just gone up consistently. We started seeing 500,000 sat transactions, 1 million sat transactions. Recently, we're seeing like 6 million sat transactions. So people are becoming much more comfortable, clearly like holding serious amounts of Bitcoin on their Lightning wallets, but they're also able to transact them with us seamlessly.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed, my first time experiencing Lightning, I guess, was May of this past year. I really got into it then, and immediately noticed how smooth the process was. Like, yes, back then there were some hiccups and me trying to understand how it all worked. I'd have a failed payment every now and then, but when it worked, you're just like, whoa, right? That is a magical experience, and it is way better than sitting around for 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes waiting for a confirmation to go through. And then, we have all this, we have Lightning addresses, we have QR codes, scanning. Lightning is just it's such a mobile first experience. Yeah. Where I think on-chain Bitcoin, you're using, you may use a hardware wallet, you may use an exchange, you're probably not doing that as much on mobile. So it does feel like it's more fluid, it's easier to use. It's I agree.
And it's I think we're just starting to see what the capabilities of Lightning will become. And we use it for more than just, basic payments. We actually use it to refund our auction bidders through email. We can just send them an LN URL withdraw code, a QR code that they can just scan with their Lightning wallet. That's not something you can do on chain that I'm actually familiar with because it's a purely kind of push static payment. We don't need to receive an invoice, or we don't need to receive an address from the customer to pay them. We just send them a loaded QR code and they just scan it and they're good to go.
Oh, very cool. So if there's 100 bidders on an item, one guy wins it, the other 99 are automatically going to get an email with an invoice, and they can just pull their funds instantly.
Exactly. Or if they have an account with us, they can log in and their QR code's right there. Whatever collateral they've built up, they can withdraw it immediately.
Interesting. See, I think there's still a misconception in crypto that Bitcoin or Lightning can't do stuff. Like it's just a token. It's just a digital gold or whatever. What was your moment of realization where you decided to build on Bitcoin? You decided to build on Lightning. How did you come to realize that it could do some of these things, and that you can kind of use it in interesting ways beyond its ability to be a store of value?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, I have to give a lot of credit to Ryan Gentry over at Lightning Labs, and before he joined Lightning Labs, I came across a blog post of his, and I can't remember the name of it. I think he was working for Multichain at the time, and he put out a blog post with them, and he talked about all of like the potential use cases of Lightning beyond payments, and he alluded to specifically using your Lightning node as decentralized identification. And that kind of opened my eyes to, okay, this is bigger than payments. Now, I would have hoped that infrastructure would have developed faster by now. But I think that's just the nature of building Bitcoin. Like it's slower development, but it's a much more secure foundation. And that's ultimately why we're in Bitcoin in the first place, is because we want to build on, secure, trustless infrastructure. So that's the trade-off we have to deal with. It's sometimes it can feel a little slow compared to what's going on elsewhere, but at the same time, what's going on elsewhere, like a lot of that stuff is breaking all the time, and we can't have that on Bitcoin. So it's kind of low time preference and in the app builder perspective.
Right. Are there any? So you talked about identity and possibly having that on Lightning. How might that come to be? Like, what would that look like? Is that something you guys are actively thinking about integrating? I'd love to hear more about how that works.
I'm honestly not an expert on it, and I wish I could spend more time keeping up with it. But it just, I'm wrapped up in the daily grind here. But from my understanding, actually, I think it's relatively simple if you're running your own node. If you're running your own node, your node pub key can basically act as your identity. And I think it's, the feature name is slipping my mind right now, but you can technically send funds directly to someone's pub key. And you can send messages over Lightning Network to someone's pub key. So you start to see some of the capabilities that you would generally get with a digital identification, but in this case, it's pseudonymous, right? Your real identity is not tied to it. So I think there's so much to be explored there, and we're just scratching the surface so far. Now we are 100% like we want to be early adopters of this stuff, but it's not going to be us to build it. Like we are the app developers. It's kind of a different layer of the stack. The infrastructure, the protocol builders, they're the ones that really have to make it production ready. But as soon as they do, we're all over it.
Yeah. So how far do you think you guys can push in that direction of being decentralized or being kind of, putting identity on Lightning? Like, I know right now you have payments and you have some logic that is enabled by Lightning, but then there's other functions of the app and the maybe the front end and the fact that you guys are a company that are traditional and more centralized in that respect. How far do you think you take it in that direction of like decentralizing things? How much logic can you put on Lightning? Can you put on Bitcoin? Yeah.
It's a great question, and it's to be determined. Look, we are a centralized company. We're a corporation. We're a centralized marketplace. So there is trust associated with using us, and as long as we have that structure, there always will be. So us becoming a fully decentralized organization, I don't know if it'll ever happen. If it does, it'll be a long way off. But we can use greater capabilities of Lightning and other layers of the Bitcoin stack to automate a lot of our processes so that there is less trust involved in each individual process. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that once kind of the smart contract feature sets get built out, which, I think a lot of that will be built out on Lightning. But we're still not, I know some teams they have their smart contract solutions, but we haven't seen anything that we've seen that's like fully baked enough for us to integrate. I know it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, when you think about Scarce City's business has two kind of differing, like you have different perspectives, right? You have a part of the business where you're actually shipping things in more of like an eBay style exchange. And then you have a part where you're doing digital goods in more of like an OpenSea style exchange. What's the rationale behind having both those? And maybe we can dive into like which you think is going to be bigger over time, which is going to be more, which the direction you guys are heading in.
Yeah, so physical art, it's the heart and soul of Scarce City. It's what our core creator group, it's what they create. We will never leave physical art as long as there are people making it, and as long as people want it. And I think that'll drive our trends generally. It's like what does the market want? What do collectors want? However, I'm a huge believer in the digital asset space. NFT is the common term. I don't like that term. I think it's fair on the other chains, but if it's on Bitcoin, I like the term rares. I think it's just important for us to differentiate ourselves from that ecosystem because it is different. The technology is different. There's the security model is different. Any tokens that we deal with, they are secured by the Bitcoin blockchain. And culturally, they're entirely different. There's a different history with the Bitcoin tokens. These things have been created since 2014. And it's kind of like the counterculture of the digital asset space, which is what I love about it. And it's it's been a really interesting thing to watch. Of course, it was on our radar from the beginning, getting into this space. When I got into Bitcoin 2017, I saw some of the Rare Pepes, but didn't really understand it. Would just see the Pepes pop up on Twitter here and there. And then as like the NFT scene blossomed on Ethereum, it kind of seemed like, the Rare Pepes were dead. The counterparty protocol was dead. Like, I didn't see the activity. Of course, I wasn't looking for it. Now, lo and behold, the entire time there was like a core group of diehard community members that were keeping this thing going. The Rare Pepes kept being traded through all the bear markets. And now it's had this like amazing resurgence as people have come to recognize that these are like the real OG relics of, the digital asset space. And even more so now as Ethereum fees have gone through the roof and kind of become, it's kind of become unusable except for like really high value items. We're now seeing this resurgence of creators, of digital creators actually, creating tokens on Counterparty again. And the crazy thing is there's actually demand for them. There's very strong, vibrant communities that are popping up and growing based on Bitcoin tokens, the Bitcoin rares. So it's been just a beautiful thing to watch. It's blown away all my expectations. I was like, the first podcast I did actually was about a year ago. And I think I said, I should dig up the quote. I think I said like, Rare Pepes are dead. The counterparty is dead. I was totally wrong. And I'm glad to be wrong. But beyond that in the future, I think you're also going to see with the Bitcoin infrastructure development, other protocols for issuing Bitcoin-based tokens. And there's a lot of really interesting ideas, a lot of smart teams working on this. Of course, it's not real yet. So, it's definitely, you have to take that with a grain of salt. But in general, I am extremely excited about what we're going to see on Bitcoin for digital assets. I think there's a big future there. But at the same time, we will always support the physical goods. We love the physical goods. Our collectors love the physical goods. It's not either or, it's both.
Right. I want to dive into all this, but I want to start with can I get you to expand on some of those technological differences between rares and NFTs and some of the cultural differences, what you see them as?
Yeah, so, the technical stuff, I'm not a super technical guy, so I'm not the best person to talk about it, but I can explain how Counterparty works on a high level. When you are issuing a token on Counterparty or transacting a token, you're actually executing a Bitcoin transaction, and the op return field of the Bitcoin transaction, which, if you're familiar, it's kind of like the memo field. Is actually used in a standardized way to input metadata associated with that token and the action of that token. In the Counterparty servers, they query the Bitcoin blockchain and look for metadata that fits that format, and they bring it into their servers. Hopefully I'm getting that right. That's my understanding.
So basically all the rares are issued on Counterparty, is that correct?
All the Rare Pepes, certainly. The 99% of tokens on Bitcoin are issued on Counterparty. Now there is Liquid, which is technically a side chain, not really on the Bitcoin network, but certainly some overlap with Bitcoin there. But that's a much smaller ecosystem than what's on Counterparty right now.
Okay. And then from a cultural perspective, how do these two communities differ, with the NFTs and then the Bitcoin side?
Yeah, I think you trace it back to how these things started. 2014 was the first token on Bitcoin. It was actually called the test token. And from there, very slowly, there was a lot of experimentation. There were projects like Spells of Genesis. The Rare Pepe project started in 2016. And the way that started was some guy who goes by the name of Mike that no one knows, or maybe someone knows, but generally people don't know who he or she is besides going by the name Mike, just dropped a counterparty token for what's known now as the Nakamoto card. So you've probably seen this flying around Twitter. It's basically like the Dorian Nakamoto portrait, but as a rare Pepe. And I don't think I wasn't around for this, but from what I understand, there wasn't much explanation around it. I think maybe he started a Telegram group, and there was no utility associated with this token. It was just creating this token and putting it out there and making it for sale for super cheap. So the point here was just one. So there was an issuance of, I believe, 300 for that one. So 300 editions of this token.
Okay.
But the point here is it wasn't about money. It wasn't about utility. Like Spells of Genesis came before, but that was actually used as a card game. And that's part of the reason why a lot of the early Rare Pepes, they take the aesthetic of playing cards, but there's no game. And maybe one day there will be. I think people have thought about creating a game out of it. But the point is that it's because it has no utility, it's technically art. But also, like, it wasn't about money. These things weren't worth anything. It was people were just doing this for the LOLs, and that's something that can't be repeated, right? Like now, if you're doing anything in the digital asset space, it's about the money. So it's kind of this like immaculate inception moment, which reminds me a lot of Bitcoin, right? Like pseudonymous creator, Satoshi Nakamoto just dropping a white paper out there and bootstrapping this network. The foundation of the Rare Pepes, like the story there is really authentic to Bitcoin in a way that you're just not going to see anywhere else. And I think, that's the start of the culture, and it's just kind of built up in that direction ever since. And especially going through what I described of the counterparty bear market, the Rare Pepe bear market. Like counterparty is like one of the most hated technologies I have ever experienced. Like not only like people on Ethereum hate it, like on Bitcoiners, a lot of Bitcoiners have hated counterparty since its inception for a variety of different reasons. But what's amazing is it's survived all that, and now it's stronger than ever. So it's kind of like it has this like dejected type of culture, but like ultimately triumphant, at least so far. So it kind of has this kind of hero's journey story to it as well, which just makes it really interesting. But in general, it's like, the pop stars, like they're going to be the celebrities, they're going to be issuing their tokens on Ethereum or whatever other, latest and greatest altcoin that's out there. But it's kind of the counterculture that lives on Counterparty. And that's what makes it beautiful. Now, there are some kind of big names that are minting on Counterparty now. Ghostface Killer just did his first drop on the Fake Rare project, which is a reboot of the Rare Pepes. But Ghostface Killer, he's not a pop star, right? He's kind of counterculture. So we're seeing things move in that direction, which just makes it a lot of fun. And again, I think it's authentic to Bitcoin. I see Bitcoin as counterculture. I see Bitcoin as Bitcoin is like a fight for financial freedom. The Rare Pepes were a fight for freedom of expression. And they just have these amazing parallels, and it's very authentic to what we've seen in Bitcoin so far.
Yeah. Now, as new collections are created on Counterparty, for example, the fake rares, does that start to eat into Bitcoin's kind of or the organic kind of like authentic adoption of the Rare Pepes, where you talked about how people weren't doing it for money? Is the fact that now people realize some of this stuff does have value, does that kind of eat into it at all? Or do you still think that the community today and moving forward is going to be different from the community you might see on Ethereum, where people are definitely, minting this stuff for financial gain?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, certainly now any token project that anyone's doing, like there's a monetary association with it. And that's, not always a bad thing. It's, it's great for artists to actually make some money for a change. So you can't recreate that immaculate inception that the Rare Pepes have, but a lot of the culture does carry over. Does it take away from it? No, I don't think so at all. I think it actually amplifies it. And I think this is, just meme culture and meme economics in general. It's kind of funny to see anybody, like, people get upset about copywriting or, taking someone's work in the digital space. But as long as you can point to what the original work is, like any replicate of it, any variant of it, it just amplifies the original meme. I think that's the difference. One of the biggest differences of the digital world versus the physical world. Like, if you're creating something in the digital world, you want people to copy it because you can always prove, there are challenges around this, but as long as you can prove that yours is the original, any variant, any copy of it is just going to strengthen your original meme, which, whether it's monetary value or just awareness, attention, it creates more of it.
Okay, so I want to give the audience kind of perspective on how big this kind of Rare Pepe collection is, or how important it is. We talked a bit before the show about how there's multiple marketplaces, and it's a little bit tricky to find data on this stuff. I guess, are there any, can you cite any kind of like last sales or large sales or notable, like how much are these Rare Pepes going for? I know they're different in the number of issuances on each token, but like, how do we grasp like how big this is? Can you help us grasp that?
Yeah, so the actual number, I'm not sure if anybody has an accurate calculation of it because the information is disparate all over the place, and no one so far that I've seen has been able to bring it all together. What I can tell you is that there are 1,774 Rare Pepe cards. Each of them has an issuance, a supply that was set by the creator, and that supply can vary from 1 to I don't know if there was a cap. I mean, I've seen some that I think are like 1 billion. So of course, the perceived value of the card is going to depend somewhat on the supply of that card. To give you a sense of what these things trade for, Christie's did an auction for one of the very few Rare Pepes that has an issuance of 1. I believe this was in October, and I think it went for 3 million or so. So certainly attracts large numbers, and the 100. It's kind of what you see a lot of is like the 100 supply Rare Pepes. Those are the ones that are most frequently traded, I think, because there's a lot of them. First of all, not a lot of them, but like it's a pretty common issuance count. And it's seen as like rare enough to be valuable. Now there are others that have higher issuance. Like this, again, this is art, so there's no formula for determining like what these things are valued. It's all just what people perceive the value is. And it's there are objective factors like how early the card was created, the supply, but then there's less tangible factors of just like how cool, or as we say, how dank the card is, and that's in the eye of the beholder, right? So you can see, you can see these things trade for any number you can imagine. I would say a typical 100 supply Rare Pepe these days trades for the equivalent of maybe 2,000 USD, which is kind of crazy. Like it's these things were basically thrown around for free. As of like maybe before a year ago.
Yeah.
But as it's kind of become more obvious to more people that digital tokens, NFTs, call them what you may, they're here to stay. And Rare Pepes are one of the like original projects, and that can never be changed.
Right. Now, if someone's going to go out and buy a Rare Pepe and they use Scarce City, can you walk through like how the business model works? Are you guys taking a cut on that? I know you're one of many marketplaces, right, for purchasing this?
Sure, yeah. So there are a variety of different places to buy Rare Pepes. When I first was introduced to them, it was really hard to obtain a Rare Pepe. I mean, you could buy them over the counter, find someone on Telegram and like just trust them, basically that when you send them the money, they're going to send you the Pepe. There is a lot of trust in the Rare Pepe community. People have reputations here, and they value their reputations. But if you were to buy one today, let's start with Scarce City, and let's start with the seller, because we use our kind of unique innovation of Bitcoin as collateral to make the selling experience easier for Rare Pepes. So instead of having to escrow your Rare Pepe card in a random address and pay the fees associated with that and take on the risk of maybe something happening to that escrow wallet being compromised, we don't take custody of the asset. We require a listing deposit that works similar to how our auction bid deposits function. So if you're listing a card for a price of, let's just use easy numbers, $100, maybe we'll require $5 of collateral that's payable in Bitcoin on-chain, Bitcoin Lightning, and that's what keeps you accountable for actually delivering the card should it sell. And as soon as you cancel that listing for whatever reason, you get that collateral back. So it creates an easy option to where like you don't have to go through the risks of losing your card or the cost of losing your card. All you have to do, if you have Lightning especially, just put down a little bit of sats and Lightning and you're kept accountable for actual delivery. Now from the buyer end, it's real simple. You just go to Scarce City. We try to make it as easy as possible to search for different Rare Pepes and sort through them. You find one you like, you see a price in Bitcoin for that Rare Pepe. All we require from you is an email address and your counterparty address. So this is actually the trickiest part of the process at this point is your counterparty address. You need a wallet. Actually, I should take that back. You don't need a specific wallet for holding a counterparty asset. Counterparty assets can be held on any Bitcoin address because it functions on Bitcoin. But there are specific wallets that make it easy to manage your Rare Pepe assets on specific Bitcoin addresses. So generally, you want to go to like freewallet.io is the best all-purpose wallet for managing counterparty assets. Create a wallet there, and then you would use it very similar to how you use any Bitcoin wallet. You have an address, and if you're buying a Pepe from Scarce City, you input that address with your order. You're directed to pay the invoice. You're just paying, again, you're paying Bitcoin on chain or over Lightning, and the seller has 24 hours to deliver that Rare Pepe to you. As long as they do, they get their collateral back for that listing deposit. If they don't, they lose their listing deposit and the buyer gets refunded. And we even actually give some of the listing deposit to the buyer should that transaction fail. But what we've learned through all of this, whether it's our auctions or our fixed marketplace listings, is that it takes very little collateral to keep marketplace participants accountable. We've settled on 1% collateral for auction bid deposits, and it's about 5% for marketplace listings. And that's all it takes. People who interact with us, they value their Bitcoin, and even if it's a small amount, like there's this risk aversion bias that's amplified in Bitcoin. People don't want to lose their sats, so that means we don't need many sats from them to keep them accountable.
Yeah, like people have an aversion to losing more than they care about winning something, right? They at all costs don't want to lose whatever they put up.
Yeah, it's basic human psychology, right? But I think Bitcoin kind of puts it in a hyperdrive. Like no one wants to see their Bitcoin balance go down. That's right. A terrible feeling, even if it's just a little bit. It's a very strong incentive for accountability.
And then are you guys taking a fee on, I guess, all successful trades? You guys earn a fee on that?
Yeah. That's how our business works, whether it's auctions or marketplace sales. We take a small fee.
How does that fee compare to something like, I think OpenSea is in the realm of 2.5%, I think. What's that like from you guys?
For digital goods, it's somewhere in that range, maybe a little bit more because frankly, we have more of a manual process. And there's more risk associated with that and more work associated with that. With physical goods, it's a little bit more because we are taking on the risk of items moving from point A to point B in meat space. Again, more work, more risk. However, compared to the traditional art world, it's a tiny fraction of what the galleries charge or the auction houses charge.
What do they typically charge? I'm curious, like Christie's auction house.
It's a great question. I don't know specifically. I just watched this documentary. Oh man, I can't think of the name of it, but it's about the traditional art world. And wow, talk about a broken system. It's straight up extortion for artists and collectors, frankly. The basic supply chain is an artist partners with a gallery, and the gallery, they have their premium location, their premium foot traffic, and their premium brand, and the relationships with the collectors. So I think they charge like a 50% margin. And even the galleries, like if I were to just show up in a New York City gallery and say, I want to buy this whatever painting, and it doesn't matter, say I have the money, it doesn't matter. Like, you can't just do that. They actually want to vet their collectors, and what they're looking for. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but they're looking to make sure I'm not just going to flip the artwork and put it immediately up for auction, because they have the relationship with the artist to maintain. But the thing is like when it goes to auction traditionally in the secondary market. So after it goes to the seller. Then it goes to the collector, and then it goes up to auction. And that's where you see like the headline numbers. The artist doesn't see any of that, right? They are out of, the transaction at that point. So it's a very strange model. Like it's something that could only have been created through kind of, antiquated systems. And all along the way, you have these different monopolies that just create bad deals for artists and collectors. So the digital world, on Bitcoin specifically, creates new options where artists can take their work to auction as the primary sale, and they get, the great majority of those proceeds. And then even for secondary sales, this comes down to the platform, but for any secondary sales of physical artworks, we give 10% royalty to the artists, so they can participate on the upside should their artwork increase in value over time.
Right, and it almost seems like the putting art on a digital platform and allowing people to buy and sell has almost created a new breed of art collectors and of art traders. Right, like there's definitely happening on like OpenSea and some of the other crypto platforms, where people are just flipping, back and forth, and there's a lot more liquidity. It's a lot easier to buy. It's a lot easier to sell. Are you guys seeing some, like, do you have any insights on how people are using Scarce City? Are they primarily using it to collect? Are they trading? Are they trying to flip things? Has that changed over time?
It varies a lot depending on which part of our business. So the traditional or not traditional, the physical Bitcoin artwork, it's really, people are buying this thing first and foremost because they love it and they want to hold on to it. We actually do receive a lot of secondary market offers that are higher than actual auction price. And, 90% of those have been declined by the original owner, even though it could be a quick flip for them. And it's because like they really love this thing, or maybe it is an investment to them. Of course, I think art will always have that aspect, but it's a long-term investment. They're not interested in flipping it. There's also, especially in the physical art world, like in the Bitcoin space in particular, there's a relationship with the artist. It's really about the artist. The aesthetics of the artwork is just a small component. And when people are buying an artwork, they're buying it because they're buying a piece of the story of that artist. A lot of these artists, they've been on Bitcoin Twitter for years. They've built reputations for themselves, not just for creating art, but being activists. They are creating the memes that are spreading the word of Bitcoin. And, that's what the collectors in this space, they really respect that. So there's not, a lot of our bidders, like they have a bidder name that's associated with their auction bid. Maybe it's anonymous, maybe it's pseudonymous. A lot of times it matches with their Twitter name. They don't want to be known as the guy who's just flipping their favorite artist's artwork. Now it's a little bit different in the digital space, specifically with the Rare Pepes, and part of that is there's a few different parts. So first of all, the artists aren't known for a lot of the Rare Pepes. That just wasn't a part of the ecosystem when it first started. There was no input for artists. A lot of the artists became active members in the community, and they kind of became known. And there's kind of these unstandard directories that associate the Rare Pepes with different artists. But you don't have generally as strong of a relationship with the artist when you're buying their piece. There is exceptions. There's the Mr. Hansel out there, which is one of the most prolific Rare Pepe artists, one of the most talented, and he's a very active member of the community. And I think many of his buyers have a very strong relationship with him. So there is that. Now, of course, with any digital good, it's much easier to trade these things because of their digital nature. You're just inputting, it's like sending Bitcoin, right? It's that easy. So because of that, it's going to be much easier to flip these things, and people do. Speculation is a big part of it. So speculation, I don't know. Of course, it has a dirty connotation, but at the end of the day, it's fun. People want to have fun. Collecting is fun. Buying and selling collectibles is fun. Now, do your own research. Make sure you're not doing anything too risky outside of your means, but if you treat it like a hobby and the amount of money you're putting involved is in line with what a hobby should be, then I don't think there's necessarily anything bad with that speculative aspect of it. And it creates this community that comes around it. When people get into Rare Pepes, they're not doing it in a silo. They're in the Rare Pepe chats, they're talking about their Pepes, and they're making friends with other people in this community. So there's a lot of good that comes out of it as well.
And when it comes to this Rare Pepe community and the kind of, growth you've seen since that Rare Pepe bear market you mentioned lasted a few years, what were some of those catalysts along the way? What got Rare Pepes from this being this forgotten thing that's overshadowed by other chains and other crypto projects to having this cultural moment again and getting back to to being valued as one of the original digital assets?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors. And again, I wasn't there from the beginning, so I can only speak to as a secondary source. But, the elephant in the room is, the Rare Pepes, the Pepes in general, were at one time, and for some people still associated with, the alt-right kind of taking the meme over. And I think that happened kind of coincidentally right as the Rare Pepe project was started. And it's really important to emphasize that the Rare Pepe project has no association with that. You look at all the cards, and some of them are edgy, they're funny, they're witty, and they're not always politically correct, but they're certainly not associated with hate by any means. And a lot of them are very much associated with love and just kind of art. But because the meme was also taken in that direction around the same time, there was, that connotation with it. And I think it took a long time for people to get over that. At the end of the day, Pepe is just a frog. It's just a meme. And it's actually really interesting to study it. There's a documentary, I think it's Feels Good, Man. I think it's on Amazon Netflix, that talks about the whole evolution of the Pepe meme from when Matt Fury started it. And actually there's a prehistory, if you really want to dive deep. Pepe the Frog's been around for a really long time. But there's something about this meme where people just want to keep it going and they want to create their own versions of it. But just because one group, creates their own versions of it, that doesn't mean that's what the meme is now. That's just their interpretation. and anybody can use this meme for however they want. So it's super interesting kind of a case study just for the evolution of digital memes. Rare Pepes is one of the original digital memes. It started on MySpace before it was co-opted by the alt-right on 4chan. And I think even on 4chan, like there was a lot of people who were not associated with alt-right that just, were posting Pepes for the lulz. So, anyway, it took a long time for people to get over that. I think most people have gotten over that. Like, time just has solved that. Beyond that challenge, look, a lot of the people who were interested in doing more with cryptocurrency beyond transacting coins, they moved on to Ethereum. Ethereum, attracted a lot of the people who wanted to create things, and Ethereum was more custom tailored to the issuance of tokens. At the same time, a lot of people in the core Bitcoin community were upset about counterparty tokens bloating the chain, even though, as it turns out now, like counterparty tokens are kind of, they're kind of keeping the chain alive, and that they're one of the few ways that fees are being generated to miners now that block space is kind of mysteriously empty. So, a lot of that creativity ended up going over to Ethereum, and it was only like the hardcore believers that stayed with the counterparty and Rare Pepe community. And from there, look, NFTs obviously have had their moments on Ethereum predominantly, but you've had this group of quote unquote archaeologists that are saying, okay, like this is a thing, this is going to be very much a big thing in the future. Where did it start? And they've just, started tracing it back. And of course, it goes back to Rare Pepes, and even before that, to Spells of Genesis and other tokens. So I think that started to get some attention around it. And now what's been super interesting is, fees on Ethereum have become so high and the chain's become so difficult to use, whereas it's super cheap to transact on Bitcoin. So because of that, you've had this new breed of creators that are now opting to create new tokens on Bitcoin rather than Ethereum or the other chains.
Now, I didn't know much about the history of Pepes. So the whole like meme culture, I wasn't around for that like initial starting point. The internet has seemingly exploded with memes in the last few years. Is there a market, do you think, for other memes and other kind of communities built around memes to monetize those as tokens? Is that something that can be replicated? I know it's not that perfect, authentic, organic starting point that the Pepes had, but is that, do you view that as like a potential avenue for memes to kind of become monetized?
Yeah, certainly. And, at the end of the day, everyone has their own definitions of things, but to me, like, all art is a meme. Like, art is a meme, right? Art is memes. It's, it's telling stories through simple visuals. So I think, we've already seen that. But, of what we think of as far as, like, traditional Bitcoin memes, for example. And look, Bitcoin has the best memes. I think there's absolutely an opportunity for these things to be tokenized. Now, does it take away from some of the authenticity? Perhaps. There will be a money element to them. But at the same time, it also incentivizes meme creators to make better memes, which is ultimately a good thing. Like, who doesn't want better memes, right? Like, everybody benefits. And also, it's like the meme creators, they benefit. Like, they're getting compensated for their work. So yeah, there's a give and take, but I think it's more kind of good than bad. Generally, I think it's a great opportunity, and hopefully, as the token ecosystem on Bitcoin develops, that'll become a more real opportunity.
And do you guys plan on then listing other collections as some of these other memes or other digital art forms kind of pop up? Do you plan, because right now you got like a dedicated Rare Pepe or a Pepe selection on Scarce City. Is that something you foresee to have like dozens or many of these different collections available over time?
Yeah, I think so. So far we support the Rare Pepes, the original project. We also support the Fake Rares, which is the reboot. We're using these two projects as as kind of our testing grounds for optimizing the marketplace. Like there's still so much work we can do to make this a better marketplace. And it's easier to do that when you're focused on a specific project. But once we feel like we're in a good place with that, we certainly want to expand it to other collections, whether it's, other kind of older vintage collections or the newer communities that are popping up. We want to be a marketplace for essentially all of these Bitcoin native token communities.
Interesting. So what's up next on the Scarce City roadmap? Or like, what are you most excited about in the next 6-12 months? Would love to hear more on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what we talked about is what I'm really excited about. I'm excited to see how the digital space evolves. But beyond that, look, I mean, Bitcoin has this special quality where people just want to devote their resources to it, whether it's their financial resources and invest in or create things around Bitcoin. Whether it's content creators like yourselves or, developers want to build on Bitcoin, but there's so many creative people who want to devote their creativity to Bitcoin. And this is where the Bitcoin art idea started. So we want to support that more and more. Now, as we've started out kind of very grassroots and very small team, we've had to do a lot of manual processing, which has limited how many artworks we can support. So what we really want to do is scale up a lot of our sale formats so that any creator can plug into them. And we can be the home for them to sell their artwork and get the best value for their artwork, whether it's through an auction or a fixed sale, whether it's for a physical good or a digital good. We want to be the home of Bitcoin culture for Bitcoin creatives. So we'll see that in all different directions, but I think what's most important is that we can be an open marketplace where anybody can list something that's, physical artwork or digital.
Right. We can kind of close off with this one. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the rest of the Lightning ecosystem and what are some of the applications either you've used or you're most excited about, or that you've seen, Scarce City users talk about. Anything come to mind specifically?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I wish I had more time to spend just kind of diving into the ecosystem. But like I know there's so much potential here, whether it's just for micropayments. I listened to a podcast you did. I think it was your last one with Smiles. Correct me if I got that wrong.
Yep.
Incentivizing people for their behavior through micropayments. I think there's a huge opportunity there. I would love to see, this like media 2.0 thing pop up on Bitcoin, the podcasting 2.0. I haven't really seen that. Like, it makes sense for creators right now. I haven't seen it really make sense for listeners, but I think there's real potential there. So all of this, man, there's so much potential. Again, I think we're just scratching the surface. I really encourage any type of technology developers, app developers to consider building on Bitcoin because, and I'll tell you just from our personal story, before Scarce City, I have a whole history of like failed startups. And one of the challenges from like creating something from scratch is getting people to support you from the beginning when you have zero credibility. And when you're building on Bitcoin and you're building for the Bitcoin community, you already have that community. Like everybody wants you to win. And that is such a huge tailwind that I just can't overemphasize. Like that's the only way we were able to get past our, start from scratch moment is the Bitcoin artist creator. Like they wanted us to create something special. So they got behind us when we were nobody. The Lightning community, like Elizabeth Stark, like met me for coffee when like I was literally nobody. And you just won't find that anywhere else. Like this is a real, gosh, I can't think of the right words, but it's like a real, like a community where everybody is just, like wants everybody else in the community to win. It's a real kind of sum of the parts movement. So as a creator, like you can't find that kind of benefit, like of creating something new. It's so hard to create something that hasn't been done before. And if you're doing it on Bitcoin, you have a huge advantage from the start.
100% agree. And I think even more so than just on Bitcoin, I agree. Like Bitcoin obviously has the largest base of users, of holders, of people engaged in this community. But then specifically on Lightning, one thing that I find interesting is that Lightning is a network of people. It matters how many people are in the community, right? Because if you're making payments, if you're putting up collateral, if you're doing all these things, making a micropayment, supporting a podcast, whatever it is, it depends on people. It's not like some of the DeFi projects that kind of spin up and are live in a week, and some whale deposits $100 million into, and it's like, oh look, we got $100 million. You got one person, or you got a few. Like it's not a network of people,
right?
So I think that ties in perfectly with your point of like you have this base of actual supporters, and the people are there to support all the projects.
And it's it's a user base that's ready for you too. Like anybody who's already using Lightning, if you're creating a Lightning app, like they're ready to use your product. I mean, people are looking for ways to use Lightning. Like, they will seek you out if you're doing something new on Lightning.
100%. And now you got node services. You got like Umbrel's got 15,000 plus people using their operating system with nodes that are ready to plug into applications. And so now any application that comes along and says, hey, we need to grow our users, we need to get new people on board. Well, you go to someone like Umbrel, or you go to some of the other services, and all of a sudden there's like an addressable market of people already there. Like I talked with Romain Rufael at LN Markets.
Oh yeah.
Previous episode. He mentioned that when they opened on Umbrel, or when they integrated their app on Umbrel, like within that first month, they got like 2,000 plus new users. And I just see that like continuing over time, where anytime now a Lightning app is going to be integrated into one of these big services, there's a growing number of people already there, already using other apps, and it just gets better and better, right? Like the app store grows, there's more complexity, there's more interesting things to do on Lightning. They all feed off each other. People can earn, people can spend, people can, collect. It's all sorts of interesting use cases are emerging, but I think it all comes back to the people. I think you're right there.
Yeah. I mean, it's the network effects. They expand in different ways, whether it's, the technology infrastructure, the installed base of users, the liquidity, the community. Like, it's just so much easier to win when you're creating for the Bitcoin community.
Yeah, and that whatever you're building is built on a solid foundation.
Exactly.
That's another important thing. It's like
that's
it's not changing. It's there.
Right.
You can always count on it.
That's the trustless nature of Bitcoin, and it's more dependable than any other network we have. So having that, like, it encourages people to devote more of their time and resources to it because they know it's going to be there for the long term.
Totally. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation. This is a lot of interesting insight and a whole new perspective on Lightning that, I just didn't understand that art world before. Like I'm not immersed in it, and hearing your perspective on it is really, really awesome. So thank you for taking the time. Where can people find more about you and Scarce City?
Yeah, so we're all over Twitter, that's DOT City. We have a Telegram channel, Scarce_City. It's our banter channel. That's where we throw out our memes, and you get all of our auction notifications there. Me personally, I'm at Tramount. I don't post that much, but DMs are always open. If you ever want to hit me up, if you're doing something that's related to what we're doing, or maybe if you just think what we're doing is cool, please reach out. Always happy to chat.
Awesome. Thanks for taking the time, and hope we can do this again sometime soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin. This has been great.
Welcome to the lightning round. This is your opportunity to send in any questions, any comments. You can send in some sats and support the show if you'd like. This is a Lightning podcast. If you don't already have one, go out and download a Lightning podcasting app. Fountain is my favorite one to use, but there are many of them, and you can send in questions and comments, and you can support the show. In the last couple of days, I got in a few streams. BTC Rich sent in some sats. Mary Oscar sent in some sats and left a comment. he said, great episode. This is in response to episode number 11 with Daniel Berezovsky of Smiles. Oscar says, feedback for the lightning round. It should be at the start of each episode, not at the end. And you should say who the next guest will be at the end of the previous episode so people can ask questions for that guest. Love the feedback. I'm 100% on board with the second part. But listeners, I want to hear what you have to say about the first part. Do you think the lightning round should move to the beginning of the show? Should it stay at the end? 100% agree that I should be telling you all who the next guest is going to be so you can ask questions. Just as a heads up, the next guest for this show will be Graham Krizik of Voltage. He's the CEO there. So if you have questions for Graham, send them in and we will answer them on the show. But I'd love to hear what you think. Should this move to the beginning? Should I move this segment to the beginning of the episode? Should I leave it where it is? Thank you, Oscar, for the comment, and can't wait to see what you guys all send in this week.